start taking a look at our subpart C. Like I said, we're not necessarily going to go in the alphabet order here. So I want to initially now switch gears and start talking about remote pilot certification, which is really describing how do you actually get this document or this card, and what are the requirements to do so. All right, so if you are a first-time pilot, meaning you don't hold any FAA certificate whatsoever, besides a student pilot license, these are going to be the requirements that you need to comply with. So you have to be at least 16 years of age or older. You need to be able to read, speak, write, and understand English, be in physical and mental condition to safely fly a drone, and then pass the initial aeronautical knowledge exam. So this is basically called the FAA written here. We'll talk more about the FAA written and what it actually includes and what it entails. And this course is really preparing you for that FAA written exam. So by the time you're done and you take all of our practice quizzes and the final exam, you should, as long as you're getting preferably high 80s, 90s, you should be just fine on your remote pilot license. And what will end up happening is you'll go to an official FAA testing center. They do have a charge for it because it is a third party. They typically nowadays charge $100 for your test, and it is a time test, and it is proctored. On the very last day of class, on the 28th, I will tell you exactly how to register for it, what to bring, what not to bring, and all of those fun things in between. The requirements for the remote pilot certificate is that it must be easily accessible by the remote pilot during the operations. And it is also valid for 2 years. And typically we say 24 calendar months is what we say. And then every 24 calendar months or 2 years, you actually have to pass a recurrent knowledge exam. The new thing is that you used to have to actually go into the FAA testing center and do an entire new knowledge test every 2 years. Now it's kind of nice because instead of the knowledge test, remember, you just go to the FAA website. It's faasafety.gov, and you can scooter over to there when your time to do your recurrent knowledge is. And now they're putting it online for free, and you no longer have to pay the $100 to go into the testing center to do it. Okay, so it's kind of a nice change that they're allowing you to do. All right, so your initial training in terms of what is actually covered and the materials. This is all directly from the Federal Aviation Regulations. So we will be covering all of this information in class. So everything that relates to the regulations in terms of what you can do and what you cannot do, airspace classifications, operating requirements, flight restrictions. We have aviation weather sources and effects of weather on small unmanned aircraft. We'll talk about aircraft loading, emergency procedures, crew resource management. And that's going to be our last class on the 28th. We have radio communications, performance, physiological effects of drugs and alcohol, aeronautical decision-making, airport operations, maintenance and pre-flight inspections. And then the new one that they added just recently this year is M, which is going to be operation at night. So the way that your initial FAA exam is going to be broken up will look something like this. You'll see that regulations will be 15 to 25% of the question or the types of or subject matter questions on your exam. We've got airspace and requirements somewhere between 15 to 25%. Weather is 11 to 16. Loading and performance is 7 to 11, and operations is 35 to 45%. The total number of questions that you'll have on your FAA exam is going to be 60. So keep that in mind. It is multiple choice. And they will give you a total of 2 hours to complete this exam. Okay, so our final exam on the last day of class, the 28th, it will actually mimic that. So we have 60 questions, 2 hours. You can take it with unlimited chances and opportunities, just need an 80% or higher. Okay. All right, switching gears. If you're a brand new pilot, disregard this. If you are a existing Part 61 pilot, you hold some type of FAA certificate, this is a little bit easier for you to get a remote pilot's license. So all you need to do is basically have some type of FAA issued license, private pilot, student pilot, commercial, whatever you want. And then you just need to make sure that you have a flight review that's been completed within the 24 calendar months as per your normal requirements. Then same thing applies that you obviously need to carry your remote pilot license if you're going to be operating in the Part 107 capacity. The remote pilot license is valid for 2 years, and then you are also subject to the recurrency, which means that every 2 years you'll take that online class through FAAsafety.gov as well in order to exercise the privileges or rights and privileges of that license. The main difference for those that have an existing pilot's license through the FAA is that instead of sitting for another knowledge exam, all you need to do is pretty cool. All you do is you take this one class, Part 107, Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems, ALC, Alpha Lima Charlie 451 is the code. You're going to basically go over to the website, FAAsafety.gov, register. If you're not registered, go ahead and take that class. It takes about 20 or 30 minutes. And at the very end of that, they're going to give you a little mini test. The test is 10 or 12 questions. They're going to really just reference the regulations section of what we're covering for the purposes of today, because they're already assuming that pilots know about aviation weather, airspace, airport operations, aeronautical decision-making. Most of that stuff pilots already are aware of, okay? So this is a very streamlined course that specifically just deals with what are the differences between, what you normally fly in the aircraft world and what are the specific differences for the unmanned aircraft systems. Once you're done with that, it will grade your test. I don't remember the score that you need. I think it's an 80%, might be a little bit lower than that. You take that to your flight instructor, or you can take it over to the FSDO office. You fill out an 8710 online. And that's it. You wait for your card in the mail. It's that simple. So it's a little bit easier for those that already have a pilot's license. For those that are just getting into it, you guys have to do a little bit more work and just take the FAA knowledge exam through one of the proctored locations, approved locations that we'll talk about at the end of the course here. All right, all of the things that we're covering are basically going to be found in a document called the Airmen Certification Standards, also known as the ACS for short. So the reason why I point this out is most students don't know what it is. And what this document gives us is this is not really telling us a teaching document. This is really a document that is advising both the instructors and the evaluators and basically all parties involved. What are the requirements and what do you need to know? And what do you not need to know for the purposes of getting a license or rating? So when we create these courses, we basically go through these documents with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that we're covering the materials that the FAA wants you to cover, and sometimes beyond that, just to kind of give you a better perspective. So anytime that you look at these, for example, I've highlighted this one in red here that says offenses involving alcohol and drugs. So we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Or consequences of refusing to submit a drug or alcohol test to furnish test results. When you take your FAA exam, should you not get 100%, a perfect score, you're going to see all of these little testing codes right below your score. The testing codes will actually reference something in the ACS. So in this case, we've got Uniform Alpha, what is that, India Charlie Kilo 1. So what that would tell us as an instructor would be that you missed something along the lines of or dealing with offenses involving alcohol or drugs. Remember, for the FAA exam, you just need a 70% or higher. In the event that you end up getting a less than perfect score there or less than 70%, you will have to meet with a flight instructor, review your deficiencies, and that's where we actually look at these codes here on the left-hand side. And we'll pretty much just ask you, do you remember a question involving offenses involving alcohol or drugs? Okay. If you don't remember it, then we will kind of jog your memory and just talk about it generally to make sure that you're comfortable answering it. Once we are satisfied that you've been retrained in your deficiencies, we'll sign off on your test, and then you can actually go take your FAA written again. You do have to pay another testing fee to the testing center, though. So just want to kind of point those out. For the purposes of ACS, you're going to notice that we never have risk management and we never have skills. So that might be coming in the future, but This is all purely a knowledge-based exam. You don't actually have to demonstrate anything in the UAV UAS arena. Okay. The way that you're gonna, once you basically get, so let me backtrack here. If you are a brand new pilot, you don't have any pilot certificate, and you go to your FAA testing center, you will then have a FAA test, a pass test, that is, meaning you got a 70% or higher in your possession. If you are a FAA pilot and you took the online course on FAAsafety.gov, you'll go ahead and print out your confirmation that you passed that section. And then what you guys and gals need to do is for our pilot crowd, you guys already know how to operate this site. For our non-pilot crowd, you're going to scooter over and navigate to this site. This is called IACRA, which is the Integrated Airmen Certification Rating Application website. This is basically our online applications that we submit to the FAA. Okay, so very simply, just go ahead and register. It will ask you for a lot of private information, including your social security number, your date of birth. It is a government website. It is a secure website. And basically what you're doing is you're going to apply for a remote pilot license. Once you apply for a remote pilot license, in the upper left-hand corner, once you're logged in, it will give you something known as an FTN number. That is your, that's basically your identification number to the FAA. And all you need to do is bring in your documentation from your exam. Having already filled out one of these on the IACRA website, you will basically go to a local flight instructor or a FSDO office, which is basically just a local FAA office. It's up to you. Flight instructors are easy, probably easier and more accessible. And all we need on your end is we need your FTN number, valid government issued ID, and then we need your original exam. Okay, so we're basically going to input some information, verify that it is you, and we have to do this in person. We can't do this online, unfortunately. You will countersign the actual application in front of us, and that's it. We submit it to the FAA on your behalf, and then you'll get that plastic card in the mail, typically in 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. So there is some instructions, and they actually have a really good help desk. So should you get locked out or anything else, you know, this is all stuff that is you can do ahead of time prior to meeting your instructor to get that signed off. All right, so what can you do and what can you not do as a remote pilot? So as the remote pilot in command, you are directly responsible for and have the final authority to as the operation of the SUAS. But so some of the things that you must do is it has to be designated before a flight. So you could switch in between flights. You could have one remote pilot basically do the first half of the flight, and then you can have someone take over as long as they're appropriately qualified. But there can only be one PIC at any given time. You need to ensure that the operation poses no undue hazard to people, aircraft, or property in the event of loss of control of the aircraft for any reason. You need to operate the SUAS to ensure compliance with all applicable provisions and regulations. So as a remote PIC, you can only operate or act as PIC, or remember, VO is our visual observer, in one operation at a time. You can't run 6 different drones or 2 different drones. It's just a single drone at a time. You do have the ability to transfer controls between remote PICs. And then finally, a person who does not hold a remote pilot certificate or remote pilot that has not met the recurrent training or testing may operate the flight controls of the SUAS as long as you are directly supervising them. Okay, so if you have someone that's out of currency or can still operate, just they're going to be under your license or operating under your supervision, which is basically operating under your license. All right, so 107.57 is the alcohol and drug section. So just remember that anything with alcohol and drugs and flying just don't really match very well. And the regulations basically are telling you to avoid acting as a remote pilot in command or any person that's manipulating the controls or a visual observer or another type of crew member. So what we typically tell pilots is going to be 8 hours bottle to throttle. That's a very easy way to remember it. So 8 hours before you touch those controls, you need to have no alcohol. And when you are under or basically operating as PIC, you also need to have a blood alcohol content of less than 0.04%. Remember, that's basically less than the national driving limit, which is 0.08%. In addition to that, within this regulation, it also says that even if you meet that criteria of 8 hours bottle to throttle and less than 0.04% blood alcohol content, you still cannot be under the influence of drugs or alcohol while you are operating it in any one of those capacities. Okay, so anything that basically alters your mental capabilities or your faculties or physical capabilities, then it is considered a no-go. Keep in mind, it doesn't have to be an illicit drug. It could be a drug that is prescribed by your physician. It could be something over the counter, right? It could be something like Benadryl, Dayquil, NyQuil, any of these types of things that could affect your abilities to effectively fly that device or that drone. Also keep in mind that cold medicines are notorious for having significant amounts of alcohol. So if you are one that kind of chugs and don't necessarily use the little spoonful as recommended, you could be in that 0.04% depending on how small you are. The regulation also states that you are actually required, it's going to require all drug and alcohol motor vehicle actions to be reported to the FAA within 60 days. So should you get pulled over for a DUI or anything along those lines, then you have 60 days to report that information voluntarily to the FAA. In the event that you do not provide that information to the FAA, they actually have the ability to either suspend or basically revoke your certificate or rating, and then also basically deny any applications for any type of certificates, whether it's drone or airplane or anything else, for up to 1 year from the date of the action itself. Okay. All right. This one's pretty simple. 10777, in the event you change or update your name, maybe you get married or anything along those lines, you just want to notify the FAA. And in the event that you change your permanent address, you have 30 days to notify the FAA. If you go beyond 30 days and you haven't notified the FAA of your permanent new address, then you actually cannot exercise the privileges of your certificate. So back in the day, you had to mail in the information. Now they make it very easy. You can go over to the FAA website, faa.gov, and just fill out the change of information. It's on actually their homepage there. And just remember, the 30 days is the limit before you can't actually operate in that capacity. All right, so that basically wraps up the regulations section. Let's go ahead and look at a couple FAA test questions that revolve around what we discussed over the last 10 minutes. All right, so let's look at this one right here and pull this one up. The remote PIC may operate how many SUAS at a time? Is it 1, 5, or no more than 2? All right, let's go ahead and take a look at it. We've got great job, everyone. 92% of the class with the correct answer. So correct answer, as we said before, is actually going to be 1. So you can't operate any more than 1. Remember, like I said, pretty much anything that I'm going to tell you that you cannot do at the very, very end of class, there's a way to get a waiver that allows you to do it in the future, but it's basically a different process and it's not the norm. All right, let's look at a medical related question here. Go ahead and bring this one up. Which of the following would medically disqualify a remote pilot? Is it A, taking a prescription medication that does not have any noticeable side effects, B, a migraine headache with the side effect of blurred vision, or C, occasional muscle soreness following exercise? What would medically disqualify you would be a migraine headache, and the migraine headache may not be the one that we're looking at, but it will be that right there. Side effect of blurred vision. We don't want anybody flying anything if they have blurred vision or any type of impairment like that. All right.